The bridge was already burning when they carried me onto it. I felt the heat through the fever, through the pelt they'd wrapped me in, through the black tide pulling me down and letting me up and pulling me down again. I heard the ice road groan the way a living thing groans, and I heard my captain, Bram. It was Bram. I would know that voice anywhere, shouting that the far span was gone, that the Dreeg had fired the pilings, that we had until the ropes went and no longer. Someone said, the king won't last the descent. Someone else said, then he'll die on this side or that one, load him. They were talking about me. I remember thinking that with an odd, floating calm, the way you think a thing that has stopped mattering. I was Kale, Alpha King of Hyrich, and I had held the high pass for 11 days against an enemy that came down out of the north like weather. And on the 12th day, a Dreeg spear had found the gap in my mail and put me on my back in the snow, and now I was cargo. A body to be loaded. They loaded me. I came up out of the dark to the smell of wolf and pitch and the particular reek of my own blood gone cold, and I was lying in the bed of a great sledge among a heap of blankets that squirmed. Pups. A dozen of them more, the pack's youngest, the ones too small to run the pass on their own paws. Bundled against me, against each other, their small hearts going like drums. Beyond them, packed to the rails, the ones who couldn't walk out, an old woman with her leg in a splint, a boy with a bandaged head. Two of my wounded warriors staring at the sky with the flat eyes of men who have already made their peace. And above us all, the burning bridge, and the pass falling away below it into white. That's the last of them, Bram said, somewhere near my head. Where's the driver? Where in the cold is the driver? There is no driver, another voice answered. Halloran won't take it, says the ice road's already going, says it's a grave with runners on it. I tried to speak. What came out was nothing, a scrape of air. I tried to rise, and my body informed me precisely and without argument that I would not be rising. And then a woman climbed up onto the driver's board. I saw her from below, from the bed of the sledge, and so I saw her the way you see someone standing between you and the sky, dark against the fire glow, the wind pulling at a plain wool cloak, a long braid whipping loose. She was not one of my warriors. She wore no mail. Her hands, when she reached for the great harness lines, were bare and scarred across the knuckles, the way a sledge-hand's hands are scarred, from rope and cold and years of it, and she gathered those 8 lines into her 2 fists like a woman gathering the reins of her own life. Who is that? Bram demanded. Girl, get down, this isn't. Then who's driving it, sir? She said. Her voice was low and even, and it did not shake. I will tell you now, because it is the truest thing I know, that of everything that happened on the pass that night, the fire, the fall, the enemy at our backs. It is her voice I remember first, because her voice is the last thing I heard before the world I'd been living in ended and the real one began. Nobody's driving it, she said, so I am cut the ropes. I did not know her name. I did not know her face. I was a dying king in the bottom of her sledge, one bundle among the bundles, and she did not know mine either. Her name was Nessa. She kept the sledge wolves, the great gray haulers, half-wild, the ones no warrior could handle, the beasts we bred for the ice roads and could barely control. She was nobody. She had been nobody her whole life, and that, she told me much later, was the only reason she was still on the wrong side of the bridge at all. Because when the order came to run, no one had thought to count the sledge girl. No one ever counted her. She had gone back for the wolves. I know all of this now. That night I knew none of it. That night I only heard a voice say cut the ropes and felt the whole world lurch. They cut the ropes. The sledge went off the bridgehead like a stone off a cliff, and the pass took us. I heard the runners scream on the ice, and I heard the pups shriek, and I heard, over both, that steady low voice, not shouting, never shouting, calling the wolves by name. Gray, gray, hold, Tornir with him. Left, 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 good girls, hold the line. 8 great wolves in the traces and a mountain falling out from under them, and she talked to them the way you'd talk to frightened children, low and certain, and they listened. I have commanded wolves my whole life. I have felt the pack move at my will since I was a boy. I had never in my life heard a wolf answer a voice the way those 8 answered hers, and I lay in the wreck of my own body and thought, with the fever burning in me, whoever she is, the beasts love her. That was the first thing. The beasts love her, and she is not afraid. The Dreeg came down the pass behind us. I heard them before I saw them, the flat drum of raider sledges, lighter than ours, faster, built for exactly this, and the horn calls they used the way we used the howl. They had fired the bridge to trap us on the wrong side, and now the bridge had failed to trap us, and they meant to finish on the ice what they hadn't finished on the height. A spear went past overhead close enough that I felt the wind of it. One of my wounded warriors made a sound, and then made no more sounds. "Down," Nessa said. "Everyone that can get down." She did not get down. She stood into it, braced on the board with her braids streaming and the raiders' horns behind her, and she drove. I want to make you understand what she did, because I did not understand it myself until later, when I walked that pass in daylight and my legs went weak at what she had asked of those runners. The ice road down from the high pass is not a road. It is a chute of blue ice hung on the mountain's flank, and it is meant to be taken slow, braked the whole way, a sledge at a walk with drag chains out and a driver praying. She took it at a dead run because the dead run was the only thing faster than the raiders, and she took it with no chains because the chains would have slowed her, and she stood on that flying board and read the ice the way a scholar reads a page. Every seam, every soft spot, every place the mountain wanted to throw us, and she threaded us through all of it with 8 half-wild wolves and her 2 scarred hands. A raider sledge drew level on our right. I saw the Dreeg driver's face, painted white, saw him raise a hooked spear to foul our lines and spill us all down the mountain. Nessa didn't so much as glance at him. She called one word, "Tornir," and the great gray on the right side of the team swung her head and took the raider's lead wolf by the throat without breaking stride, and the raider sledge slewed and screamed and was gone over the edge into the white below us, and Nessa was already looking back at the ice ahead as if the thing had never happened. I lay in the bottom of the sledge with a pup shivering against my chest, and I looked up at her against the sky, and something happened to me that I have spent the rest of my life trying to find words for. The pain let go. I do not mean it stopped. I mean the world thinned. The roar of the runners and the horns and the wind all pulled back like a tide going out, and into the quiet they left came one thing only, her. The smell of her reached me through the blood and the pitch and the fear. Cedar smoke and cold river iron, a plain scent, a working scent, and it went into me like a key into a lock I hadn't known I carried. And with it came a certainty, whole and quiet and older than my fever, older than my rain, older than me. There she is. Not there is a driver, not there is a brave woman. There she is, as if I had been waiting, as if my whole life had been the held breath before a name, and this was the name. I was dying and I did not care in that moment whether I lived, because I had heard her voice and smelled cedar and cold iron and known, the way you know your own heartbeat, that the woman driving us all down the mountain to our deaths was mine, and I hers, and that whatever the northern gods had been saving me for, it had been for this, for the bottom of a stranger's sledge on the worst night of the war, looking up. I got one word out. I'm told I did. Bram swears to it, and Bram does not embroider. Her, I said. Nobody knew what I meant. I barely knew myself. But I had said it, and having said it, I let the dark take me again, and the last thing I carried down was her voice calling the wolves home. She saved us at the hollow cut. You would have to see the place to understand. 2/3 of the way down the pass, the ice road runs out onto the old hollow bridge, not the burning one above, but the lower span, a long timber trestle over a gorge, the only way across for a mile in either direction. Past it, the ground opens out to the forest, and the lowland holds in safety. Before it, the Dreeg were still on us, 3 sledges now, closing, and no lead left to speak of. Nessa took us out onto the trestle at a full run, and I am told the whole thing shuddered under us like a struck drum. And then she did the thing that no warrior in my host would have thought of, because it was not a warrior's thought. It was a sledge hand's. She knew, the way she knew the ice, exactly how the trestle was built, because she had hauled ore across it 100 times, knew which of the great timber props carried the span, and knew that a sledge our weight, thrown just so, striking just there. She waited. She waited until we were across, until the runners bit lowland snow on the far side and the pups were safe, and the old woman was safe, and the wounded were safe. And then, with the 3 Dreeg sledges pounding out onto the trestle behind us, certain of the kill, she hauled the team hard around, drove the tail of our own great sledge into the near prop of the bridge with everything 8 wolves had left, and brought the hollow bridge down into the gorge with the enemy on it. The whole span went. Timber and ice and the raiders and their horns, all of it, gone into the white and the dark, and the roar of it rolled up the mountain and back. But she had cut it too fine. She always cut it too fine. I would learn that about her, that she spent herself down to the last coin and never told you she was doing it. The tail of our sledge had gone into the prop, and the sledge went with the bridge, half of it, the runners shearing off the edge as the trestle fell, and I felt us tip, felt the bed drop out from under me, heard the pups scream. And then a jolt and a stop, and the terrible creak of timber deciding whether to hold. We hung on the lip of the gorge, half on, half off. The pups and the wounded had spilled forward into the snow of the far bank, safe, thrown clear by her last hard turn. But the bed of the sledge, where I lay pinned under a sheared rail and a fallen crossbar, hung out over nothing, and the whole ruin was sliding, an inch at a time, toward the drop. I could not move. The rail had me across the chest, and I had no strength left in the world. I heard her voice, close now, right above me. "Hold on," she said. "Just hold on, I've got you, hold on." And a woman I had never met, who had already saved a kingdom's children and brought a bridge down on an army, who had every reason in the world to leap for the safe bank and let the last dying man in the sledge go into the gorge. That woman climbed out onto the tipping wreck instead, out over the drop, and got her scarred hands under that rail and lifted. I have carried men off battlefields. I know what a body can and cannot do. What she did was not possible. She got the sheared rail up off my chest with a strength that had no business in her arms and no source but sheer refusal, and she dragged me by the collar of my bloodied cloak up out of the tipping bed, up the slope of the ruin, hand over hand, her breath sobbing, the timber giving way beneath us with every haul, dragged me until other hands, Bram's hands, my warrior's hands, could reach down from the safe bank and take my weight. They pulled us both onto solid ground. Behind us, with a long groan and a final crack, the wreck of the great sledge slid off the lip and fell, and I heard it go, all the way down, a long time falling. She lay in the snow beside me, chest heaving, that loose braid a ruin, her scarred hands raw and bleeding. She had not once in all of it looked to see who I was. She had gone back for the wolves and taken the reins no one else would take, and driven us down a falling mountain and cut a bridge from under an army and climbed out over a gorge to drag one more life to safety, and to her I was still only that. One more life, a bundle in the bottom of her sledge. She turned her head in the snow and looked at me at last. And I looked at her, and there is no way to tell you what her face was to me except to say that I had been a king for 9 years and a man for 30, and I had never once, in all that time, seen anything I wanted to look at for the rest of my life, until I saw an exhausted sledge girl bleeding in the snow with her whole self spent on strangers. "You're a heavy one," she said, and half a laugh came out of her, cracked and disbelieving, the laugh of someone who has just realized she is going to live. "Whoever you are." That was when Bram, kneeling over me, said the thing that changed her face. my king, can you hear me?" I watched her understand. I watched the words reach her and turn over and land, "my king," and I watched her look from Bram's face to the men behind him, to the mail and the wolf sigils, and the way every one of them had gone to one knee in the snow. I watched her look at the bloodied pelt she'd been driving down a mountain and understand, at last, that it had wrapped the Alpha King of Hyrich, that the bundle she'd hauled out over the gorge was her sovereign, that she had, without knowing it, without one thought of reward or rank or anything but the life in front of her, saved the king. She went very still. The color left her face. She started to draw back, to pull her scarred hands away, to make herself small the way people make themselves small before a throne. And I could see the old habit closing over her, the sledge girl who was never counted, folding herself back down into nobody. I caught her hand before she could take it away. I had no strength. I could barely lift my arm. But I caught her raw, bleeding, scarred hand in mine, and I held it, there in the snow, in front of my kneeling men, and I would not let it go. And where our hands met, the mark woke. I should tell you about the mark, because everyone in Hyrich knows the old story, and no one in 900 years had seen it come true. The kings of my line carry a faded mark, a pale silver tracery over the heart, sleeping, meaningless, a birthmark and nothing more and less. Unless the king who bears it should ever in all his life touch the hand of the one the moon made for him. Then the old telling says the mark wakes. It warms, it silvers, it burns to light, and it answers her, and the two of them are bound as deep as root to stone, for as long as they both draw breath. 900 years of my grandsires had gone to their graves with cold marks. My own father had wed for the good of the realm, honorably and without the moon's hand in it, and had told me plainly, man to man, that the faded mark was a pretty story to comfort children, and I should not wait on it. I had not waited on it. I had ruled and fought, and told my council I would take a Luna when the realm required an heir and not before, and I had meant every dull word of it. The mark burned to light the moment her hand touched mine. I felt it go through me like sunrise, a heat over my heart that had nothing to do with fever, a silver light that rose through the torn front of my cloak, so that my kneeling men gasped and drew back, and I saw the answering light rise in her, a matched glow warming to life over her own heart through the wool of her plain dress, the two of them reaching for each other across the little space between us like two halves of one lantern finally lit. The pups felt it first, the way pups do. They came stumbling back through the snow, all of them, the whole dozen, and heaped themselves against her, whining, adoring, choosing her as plainly as pups have ever chosen anyone. Then the great sledge wolves, Gray and Tornir, and all 6 of the survivors, blown and bleeding in their cut traces, turned as one and came and lay down around her in the snow, those half-wild beasts no warrior could handle, and put their heads down at her scarred hands. And then my own warriors, who had knelt for their king, understood that they were kneeling for something more, and stayed down, and lowered their heads, not because I commanded it, but because the moon had spoken in front of them, and there was nothing to do before the moon but bow. Nessa knelt in the middle of all of it, ringed by pups and wolves and kneeling men, with the faded light burning over her heart, and looked at me with an expression I will love until I die. Not triumph, not pride, not even wonder, but a kind of frightened, wide-open disbelief. The face of a woman who has been nobody her whole life, being told, by the moon itself in front of everyone, that she was never nobody at all. "That's not," she started. "That can't be for me. I'm the Sledge girl. I keep the wolves. I'm nobody's." "You're mine," I said. The words cost me nearly the last of what I had, but I would have spent the last of it and more. "You're mine," I said again, "and I'm yours, and the moon has said it in front of my whole host, and I have spent 9 years being told this mark was a children's story." I tightened my hand on hers. "It is not a children's story. You saved every soul on that mountain. You saved me. And you did it not knowing I was anything at all, which means you did it for the thing itself, which means—" My voice was going, the dark was coming up again, but I got it out. "Which means you are the finest heart in my kingdom, and I will not have you kneeling in the snow calling yourself nobody. Not ever again. Do you hear me? Not ever again." And then, being a man and not only a king, and having lost a great deal of blood, I fainted. I woke in the lowland hold 3 days later with the fever broken and my chest bound and a great gray wolf asleep across the foot of my bed. Tornir. She would not be moved, I was told. She had chosen me by choosing Nessa, and she guarded me now as the Luna's own, and she growled at the healers, and only one voice in the hold could get her to shift so they could tend my wound. That voice came in through the door as I was struggling up onto my elbows. "Down, you great tyrant," Nessa said to the wolf, exasperated and fond. "Let the man breathe." And then she saw that the man was awake and looking at her, and she stopped in the doorway. Someone had found her a better cloak, deep green, warm, worthy of the hold. But she'd kept her own scarred hands. Of course she had. They were the only hands she had, and I looked at them first. Those raw, brave hands that had driven us all down the mountain, and then at her face, and I found I could not speak for a moment, which is unusual in a king. "They keep calling me my lady," she said at last, coming in, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed as if it might break or she might. "The healers, the old woman with the splinted leg, Bram." She said Bram's name like it astonished her that Bram would use such a word to her. "I keep looking behind me to see who they mean." "They mean you," I said. "Kale." She tried my name out in her mouth, my name, not my title. I had told Bram to tell her she was to use it, and it came out shy and careful, and I loved it. "I don't know how to be a lady. I don't know how to be a Luna. I know how to keep wolves and read ice, and I know I've mucked a sledge barn since I was 7, and there is nothing in any of that." "There is everything in all of that," I said. I took her scarred hand again. The mark warmed at once, both of us, the low, sweet answering glow of it, and I watched her breath catch at the feel of it, still new, still a wonder. "Listen to me. I have a hall full of highborn who can bow prettily and quote the old law and dance the moon dances, and not one of them, not one, would have climbed out over that gorge for a dying stranger. I don't need a Luna who can dance. I have needed my whole life and never known it, a Luna with your exact hands and your exact heart, and the moon knew it before I did and sent you down a burning mountain to find me." I turned her hand over, ran my thumb across the scars on her knuckles, gentle, reverent. "I am not asking you to stop being who you are. I am asking to spend the rest of my life beside who you are. That is all, and it is everything I have." She was quiet a long moment, Tornir thumped her tail against the floor. "You'd let me keep the wolves?" Nessa asked, in a small voice, as if it were the boldest possible thing to ask, as if this were the point on which the whole impossible business would surely founder. "The Luna of Hyrich in the sledge barn." "The Luna of Hyrich," I said gravely, "may do precisely as she pleases, and if it pleases her to keep the finest wolf team in the north, then the north will simply have to grow accustomed to a Luna who smells of cedar and comes to court with straw in her hair. I, for one, will count myself the most fortunate king in 900 years. And she laughed, the real one this time, not the cracked, disbelieving laugh from the snow, but a true one, warm and startled and lovely. And I felt the faded mark sing between us, and I knew I would spend every remaining day of my life trying to make her laugh exactly that way. She did not answer with a grand word. She was never a grand word woman. She looked down at our joined hands, at the two marks glowing quietly together, and she turned her scarred palm up and closed her fingers around mine, holding on the way she'd held the reins, the way she'd held that rail over the gorge, with everything she had and no half measures. "All right," she said softly. "All right then, I've got you." The same words she'd said in the snow, when she thought I was nobody and she was nobody and the whole world was falling. "I've got you." They are, to this day, the truest vow anyone has ever made me, and she has never once broken them. We were wed at the turn of the season, in the lowland hold and then again in the high hall when the passes cleared, and the old woman with the splinted leg walked on a mended leg, refusing all help the whole length of the hall to bless the Luna who'd saved her, and the boy with the bandaged head, healed now, carried the moon cup, and the pups, no longer so small, sat in a solemn row and only slightly disgraced themselves. Tornir stood at Nessa's side through all of it and dared anyone to object. That was years ago now. We have children of our own, too, so far, both with their mother's fearlessness and, the gods help me, her exact way of laughing at me. And Nessa is Luna of all Hyrich. And it is true that she still comes to court sometimes with straw in her hair. And it is true that the highborn have simply grown accustomed to it. And it is true that she is loved in this kingdom in a way no Luna in our long history has ever been loved. Because every winter the story is told again by people who were on that mountain. And the story does not grow smaller in the telling. It cannot. It was already as large as a heart can be. The great sledge could not be saved. It went into the gorge and stayed there. But we built another, its twin, and it does no hauling. It rests in the high hall against the north wall, polished, honored, and once each winter. On the anniversary of the night the pass fell, the pups she saved, grown now to great gray wolves in their prime, are put into its traces, and they draw at one slow circuit around the walls of the hall while the whole kingdom watches, in honor of the sledge girl no one thought to count, who counted everyone. Nessa hates the ceremony. She says it makes too much of one bad night's work. She stands at my side through it every year with her arms crossed and her ears pink, muttering that she only did what wanted doing, that anyone would have, which is not true, which was never true, which is the whole reason we do it. But there is a moment every year near the end, when the wolves come round the last turn and pass close by the high seat, and Tornir, old now, gray around the muzzle, but still first in the traces, still hers, turns her great head as she passes and looks up at Nessa, the way she looked up at her in the snow. And every year at that, my Luna's crossed arms come loose, and she reaches out one scarred hand, and the old wolf leans into it as she passes, and for just that breath my fierce, embarrassed, unbreakable wife forgets to pretend it was nothing. I watch her hand on the old wolf's head, that scarred, brave, working hand that drove us all down the mountain and lifted the rail off my chest, and reached out over a gorge for a dying stranger who turned out to be her king. And I think what I have thought every day since I looked up from the bottom of her sledge and heard her voice cut through the roar of the world. There she is. She has never let go of my hand, not once in all these years when it mattered. And I have never once, since the night the pass fell, had cause to wait on the moon for anything again.